So, once again, you're all welcome to this Sunday lecture series. This is our second Sunday lecture series in this year. The first Sunday lecture series was God's creative word. And this second, God's perfect image, is going to be a very important and powerful lesson, a series of lessons for our spiritual development and our maturity in our journey as humans. So, I would like every one of us to pay rapt attention from this June until July to every lecture that will be coming up every Sunday on this lecture series. So there will be about 8 lectures, I suppose, because there are about 8 Sundays in these 2 months. I won't be the only teacher to take us through this lecture series. There are other coaches and teachers of the imagination with me who are also going to teach you in this lessons on certain days. Okay, so let us look out for much more excitement and I would say variety in the pattern of delivering the same message. It's the same message, it's the same lesson, but there could be variety in the way it is delivered. So, God's perfect image. Let's get started. This is a very, very interesting topic. If you really understand what we're talking about here, you'd figure it is one of the most important lessons that a person could learn when it comes to their being. Okay, when it comes to their being, it is one of the most important things a person could learn. Now, we have a passage here in scriptures at the beginning of the Bible itself, Genesis 1, verse 26, 28, 26 and 27 precisely. 26 says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness." The first lesson from this statement, before we even go further to what everything else in this particular verse entails, is that the creation of anything could only be done after a certain image. That's number one. Okay. The creation of anything could only be done after a certain image, in a certain image, in a certain pattern. That's another word for image, pattern, structure, a certain form. The second is that this particular form, or any form whatsoever that we might think of, already exists in God. We see it explicitly said of man. Let us make man, that is manifestation of life, in our image. And this hour that is speaking here, this God, is us, all of us together. The word God here is Elohim. It's actually the plural of Eloha, which is the singular. Eloha means one God, one deity. Elohim means many gods that are singular, that are treated as one. It is the same as the distinction between, or similar to the distinction between policeman and the police. So policeman means one person, right? Policeman means one person, but the police means a single unit, but that is comprised of all of them. That brings us close to the idea of the distinction. Because really, when we say God, it is singular, but it is Elohim. It is used in a singular sense, but it is actually plural. It is made up of many. And that is what he says, let us. And when I say he, I'm not talking about someone on the outside. I'm talking about you and I. We started the beginning with this. We go, let us make Alice in our image and after our likeness. So the form exists in God, and creation could only be done by imitating the image that already exists in the infinite awareness of man. Every image on earth exists, but the perfect image is God himself. because we're talking about God's perfect image. The perfect image of life is God Himself. All ends run through the origin. So if my origin is God, my end must be God. You see on the field, the sesamum was sesamum, the corn was corn, the silence and the darkness knew, and so is a man's faith born. So this poet is telling us that a man's faith is born the way that the sesamum was born of sesamum, the corn was born of corn. So if man was born of God, then what is the fate of man? God. So when I say that you are God, or when you hear from Neville that you are God, or when you maybe read Blake or you read the scriptures and the Bible tells you that you are God, it's not saying that you're like a part of God or maybe a subsystem of God. No, your destiny is divinity, God, the creator, Father, the Father of all life. And actually, your origin was this the same. Your origin was the same. You started as God. And He said, let us make man in our image. So what happened after that? After our likeness. Okay, now the word likeness actually means the same thing as image. It means manner. It means in the manner of us, in the state of divinity. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them. So don't you think for a moment that, yeah, this only applies to men because of the word man? No, this was not like some Adam made and then some Eve made later on, and then that means that male was created first, female came later. This has nothing to do with that kind of pattern. This is simply the pattern of creation. It says that all creations are made in the same manner. Male and female, He created them, but He created them in His image. So when we say He, Father, God, we're not talking about gender at all, because both one same image. Now, follow me. The pattern that God started to create of you is Himself. He didn't make any random person or any random thing. He made Himself, but He made Himself in man. So you are here today, whatever time it is for you, morning, afternoon, or night, and you look at yourself and you look at a weak self. Sometimes a self that doesn't even know what else to do, that is probably confused and worried and concerned and bothered and whatever. Or you might be looking at a self that is glorified, that is dignified, that has been elated. Whichever self that you're looking at, I want you to understand that behind that is God looking at Himself. And behind that is God working out this creation. And He will not leave it. Another passage says in scriptures, He will not leave it until He has brought it to completion. So God is making Himself out of us. This is the perfect image. But if you and I are God, if we are this creative power that people call God outside, and I often say, whenever you hear the word God, and it doesn't sound like a synonym of yourself, like someone is calling you by your third or your fourth name, then you have a misconception of God. You haven't won the attitude, the glorified attitude that God actually destines you to wear. And it's all right if you have not done that, the time is coming, you will. The time is coming, every person in this world is going to identify themselves as God. But while others are going to, come to that point in time, you don't have to wait for them, do you? You can right here, right now, today, get into the creative power. You see, beside the mystical experiences that you will have, okay, which will come in their own time when you begin to become a lively vine in the vineyard of God. Besides those mystical experiences, besides the testimony of scriptures and maybe whatever people say, which in fact, yeah, I don't think we really want to count that very seriously. But of course, the testimony of scriptures is very important. But besides the mystical experiences you would have, the only other way you could know for sure, and that's why I left out other things people say. Like, for example, Nebula said, you are God many times. You go to William Blake, it says that a lot of times. Abdullah, it says that a lot of times. I have said that lots of times. What else? Many other people. The scriptures have said that lots of times. And we read it. You and I read it every now and then. We see it, we hear it. But that doesn't mean that you know. You can accept it, believe it, but it doesn't mean that you know that it is true, that you really are God. And that's why I started with you might still look at yourself and you can go, this afternoon, you probably don't even know what you're going to do with your life tomorrow yet. You probably don't even know whether it's a mess or whether it's refined or whether things are heading somewhere or not. You probably, and you probably do know. You probably have made your life beautiful with your imagination. Whichever it is, the only way you can really know who you are before your mystical experiences is by putting this creative power to test, imitating God to see if you're really a child of God. I presume that many of us here have watched this um, movie, Simba, The Lion King. Yes, The Lion King. Now, when you go over it, you see the part where Mufasa, the father of Simba, was taken took Simba on the walk to try to raise him and train him in the art of kings, in the art of lions. I was trying to teach him how to be a lion. And this is it. He put Simba out there. He said, do this, raw. Okay, look at all of this. It's hard. Go there, come here. Um, you do this way when you want to hunt. You do that way when you want to hunt, when you want to jump. And he actually he taught Simba everything there was to know about being a lion, about being a king, everything there was to know. What you would find with Simba is if Simba was, say, a hyena, he couldn't do that. He couldn't do those things that he was being taught to do. He had to be a lion to be able to roar or do any other thing that his father was trying to teach him to do. The same goes here. You can definitely test. You've forgotten you are God because clearly you became man in order to make man become the perfect image, which is God or who is God. So that's fine. You've forgotten you are God and it's all right. But you can begin to remember by the creative memory of exercising that power. Because when you do the first thing and it works, you imagine something feelingly and it happens, and it was only once an assumption in your mind. Nothing in this world was evidence for it that it could ever happen. It was only an assumption in your mind, and you started it as an assumption. You maintained that assumption and you brought it to pass. You did it the first time, then you did it the second time, and this thing was only an image in your mind. And we started earlier, we said every image exists in God. Because that's the first lesson from this passage that everything is made out of an image, and all images are actually existent in God Himself. All patterns exist in God. And the perfect pattern is God Himself. So you started with the first image, you assumed that that image is real, that it is true, you accepted it as true, and then it became true. Then it became a fact. But it was first only an assumption in your mind. You do it for the second, and it works again. You do it for the third, and it works again. So you do it the 10th time, and it still works. Okay, now you've done it 1,000 times and it's working. Okay, well, you teach it to someone else, or you show someone else how to do it, you do it for them, it works. Or they do it and it works. And they do it again and it works. And it's show it to someone else to do it and it works. And they do it again and it works. So now you've done it, it works. They've done it, it works. The third person they've taught has done it and it works. Now, would you deny that your imagination is the creative power? Of course not. Of course, now you know that your imagination is God. How? You say, well, because it creates. And God is the creator. And my imagination creates just from the image that I have in my mind. But you must do it as God is doing the creation of you right now. You see, every one of us exists in God and as God. The Spirit of the Lord dwells in all of us. The scripture says that. It says that our body is the temple of the Lord and the Spirit of God dwells in us. And what is it doing while the Spirit is in us all the way? Is perfecting the image of Himself in us. Because a son, in Galatians chapter 4, you go to that passage, it says, a son, while he is still a child, even though he is the heir of the Father's kingdom, will still be directed like a servant in the house. Those that are going to say, yes, sir, yes, your highness, yes, your majesty to him in the future, they would tell him, sit down there, come out here, jump, run, swing it. They would give him instructions that he has to follow. You'd be directed as a servant in the house, even though he's the lord of the house, or because he's still a child. However, he grows. And as he is growing, he becomes a man, the man of the house. And then when that time comes, this particular passage says that, and then he claims the authority over his house. But until then, he has to act in the capacity of a child and be subject to all the instructions that are coming from the other people, from the people in the house who are in fact going to answer to him when he becomes mature. And that is exactly how each one of us have been on this journey. Being children, we're tossed to and fro. And we are the ones, by the way, because it is the Father doing this to himself. We are the ones giving ourselves all the chastening. Scripture says that the son that the Father loves, he chastens. And then it says further that we see our earthly fathers who do this, and they do this for their own pleasure, because of what they would like to see us become. But our Father in heaven does it for our own pleasure, because of what we must perfectly become at the end of the day. We must perfectly become God. And to get there, He has to chasten us. And it chastens us. And how? How does it do it? While we are work in progress and the Spirit of the Lord is in us, we find ourselves with unwise assumptions. We find ourselves creating imperfect images, things that are unloving, and we do it unconsciously, asleep, because it is the Father who is asleep. So we sound asleep all the way, morning, noon, and night, assuming unloving things that are happening somewhere in the world, happening to someone in the world. And sometimes they happen to us, and you see people say, why me? Why me? What have I done wrong? But what have you been assuming morning, noon, and night? Now, even though all these blows of life come with all these assumptions, the Father would not leave you off until you become perfect, able to control your consciousness and able to consciously create heaven on earth. So it's not going to leave you off until you wake up to realize you're God and you're conscious of that morning, noon, and night, 247. If that is the case with Him, then let it be the case with you also. Apply your imagination in the same way. We're imitating the art of creation from the Father. And if He's doing it, and He will not leave you up, because if He does, if He did leave you up for one moment, you would cease to exist as if you never were. All of us have been at that point where we're learning something or training something or practicing something, and then we do um like 20%, and then we hold on, we give up, like we've given it all our best, and we stop, and we are to get to 100%, and then we go back again and we do 50%, we stop, then we do another 70%, and we stop. We keep coming back again and again. I believe that all of us can relate to that at one point in time or another in your learning phase. You could see it in children when they're learning how to walk, but you can also see it in yourself when you're learning a new subject, when you're learning a new skill, when you're learning how to cook, when you learned how to cook, you did it. When you learned how to sing, when you learned how to do many skills that you have today now. But God started it one time, and He couldn't, for one brief moment, leave it up and say, I will return tomorrow to start again. He couldn't. Because if He did, being the dreamer who's dreaming you to be in a certain image, if He did leave off that dream, you would cease to exist as if you never were, as if there were no history of you anywhere in the whole universe. So He never left off. That is the attitude we must imitate in creating the perfect image of our own lives. So, wear upon yourself this identity of being God, because that's actually what God has destined you to be. The sesame, as a plant now that is blossoming, was a sesame. The corn that you see now was corn when it was seed. What you see that we call man right now was God as a seed. And if man is the germination stage, what is the destiny of this man? It's going to be God. It's going to be God all the way, again and again. If the drama plays 10,000 times, there's only one outcome that would happen out of it. Because there's never been a time in this world where you plant mangoes 10,000 times. And because it was your 10,000th time, then the mango changed and became orange. Ever seen that happen? No. The same idea will come out of the same iteration because it's the same image that was put in into the iteration. So God started off with a perfect image, and that's Himself. He says, let us make man in our image and after our likeness. And so all of us are sons of God in the image of God, and we can only grow into maturity to become God. But it cannot, because He is Himself the one. He is the only person who can be the Son. There is no other person but Him. So, in order for us to be, He has to come low to this level that we call humanity. And He became human, and He completely forgot that He was God. And He now becomes what we call Alice, John, your neighbor John, who probably owes you some money, or your friend Alice probably loves luxury, or you yourself, wherever you are. You probably just have un this particular appetite for a certain, or this particular taste, or this particular style that you just love, and you can't explain why you have that kind of passion or that kind of style. But this is God, who, in order to become the Father, made Himself the Son of God, that we call you. And He would not leave it off, because if He did, the Son would cease to exist. There would never be the drama anymore. He has to keep it going until it is done 100%, taking no break. This is how you also mold your own perfect image. So wear that attitude, wear that name upon yourself. Who are you? I am God. Well, if you're God, What could you create of your life? Because this life is your life to create. It's yours. And there is no other person that you would be asking permission for. Yes, Neville says the sesame was sesame in many places. For example, you can find it in the Pronunciations of Revision. Um, you can find it in both. I think you can find it in both the chapter in Awakened Imagination and in the lecture. But it's actually a quote from a poet. I've forgotten the name of the poet now, but it's a very wonderful poem, and I love it a lot. It's a beautiful, beautiful um, lecture, or rather, poem. It's also in this lecture that's my favorite lecture of all time. It is Within by Neville. It says it there. The sesamum was sesamum. The corn was corn. The silence and the darkness knew, and so is a man's fate born. So, what is going to be your fate? You must determine it now. Don't you worry about you being God or you being man because God is working that out. And we've just mentioned right now that He's not going to leave it up. And I'm saying you are not going to leave it off. You cannot quit your awareness of being. That's the one impossible thing for man to do. It says in scriptures this way. It says it is impossible for God to lie. In other words, it is impossible for God to deny his own self-existence. And so, man, you and I, we cannot deny our self-existence. Whatever we do, however we are, whatever we see or perceive in this world, the first thing that we are aware of is being. And the only way we can relate to any other thing that we see in this world or that we perceive is by being. In fact, by being it, by being as it. That's how we can relate to it. Otherwise, we would fail to understand it, or it would fail to have existence to us. So we never quit on ourselves, really. But while that is going on, now create your own perfect life. What's your perfect image of a loving life? You see, the only thing that would indicate you cannot achieve it is if you cannot see that image in the first place. That's the only thing that would indicate that it's impossible. But can you? Can you actually see the image? Can you know what it is going to be? Life is as perfect as you wish it to be. Can you know what it is going to be like when you are the kind of man you would like to be? Maybe you want to be a noble man in this world. Maybe you want to be highly respected. Maybe you want to be sought in all great places. Maybe you want to be famous, a famous man, a famous woman. Maybe you want to be known as a powerful woman. What is your own perfect image of a perfect life? Suppose you were to live your highest ideal of the moment. Suppose you were to live the kind of life, you were to live the kind of life that you would enjoy every moment of it, that would please you, that you look at it and you'd go, I created perfection here. Okay, what would it be? Create the idea, picture it. The moment you become aware of the idea, you're not aware as it yet, but the moment you become aware of the idea, you've just given yourself the proof that it is possible. And it doesn't matter where you're starting. Remember, it's not about your background. You are God. That's your true background. And what's your true destination? You will be God, regardless of whatever you become in this world. Maybe you want to become a billionaire right now and then you become a billionaire. It's all right. You will be God. That's your destiny. You will become Him, the Father. So don't let that bother you at all. Just go on to what do you want your perfect life to be at this moment. And you'd become, conceive that image. The moment you conceive that image, then you begin the creation in the same manner that the Father did it. And this is it. It says, all of us with unveiled faces. So what happens on the level of the law? moment you the level of the law, the moment you become conscious of this life you would like to live, okay, of this perfect life, you've just unveiled your face to the glory of humanity. Now, all these images that you're creating are in God Himself. So the glory that you'd be having is really the glory of God. Because whenever you become that which you are seeking to be now, there's only one way you can identify it. And that identity or that identification would actually be as God. You'd say, I am successful. Let's say that's what you want, success. But you'd say, I am successful. Okay, well, now, who's that? That's God. So, it is the glory of God. The glory of God in this case, then, is success. God's name is glorified as success. Or maybe you wear the name with I am. Maybe when your perfect life is externalized, the one thing you could say about yourself is I am at peace. Okay, now, who is the one who is peaceful? It is God, because that's His name forever and forever. So it is all the glory of the Lord, but you must unveil your face to see that image wherever you might be starting from. Remember your background, your physical background, your social background, your financial background, your spiritual background, your religious background, your moral background, your cultural background, whatever background, doesn't matter because there's only one background that you truly and really have. And Ephesians tells us, Colossians tells us that from the beginning, He knew us, He preordained us. Meaning that your background is way beyond all of what you call yourself to be right now. Your background was from the beginning, when you were sons of God, when you were all members of this Elohim. That's your background. So your background is God. And that's the background of every person you see in this world. Don't let any person intimidate you. So, without being intimidated by any physical or mental limitations or restrictions, create that perfect image. The question is really, can you dream it up? Can you see it in your mind's eye? If you can, then you can begin to look at that particular glory and contemplate yourself as it. So the first is that you conceive it, you know of it. But now you have to conceive yourself as it so that you can be known as it. And it says, as though reflected in a mirror, we are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit, which we've talked about earlier, that all the images are in the Lord. So whatever image you're conceiving is actually of the Lord. And when you wear a noble image, the one that glorifies the name of the Lord, it's to the Lord's glory. Because when you identify yourself with your ideal, you could only use the name of God to identify it. You can't say, she is successful to refer to yourself. No. You can't say, he is rich to refer to yourself. No. You can't say, they are free to refer to yourself. You could only say, I am. And when you say that, you've called the name of the Lord. I don't care whatever your religious views might be before now, you really have just called the Lord. You've just said God. That's His name forever and forever. So we have been transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. And this tells us that it's all about your self-persuasion. To the degree that you are self-persuaded of the reality of your imaginal acts, it will become a fact in your world. So you behold it now, but you don't leave it off. That's what James was telling us in the book of James not to do. Someone comes now, he imagines himself a moment, imagine himself, maybe he's a poor man, has no money, doesn't even know what he's going to eat. He didn't eat in the morning for breakfast, doesn't know what he's going to have for lunch. He barely had dinner last night, and he didn't have any meal before then. And now he takes all of this. They are a part of his current structure of life. But now he wants to wear something new, something noble. He wants to be rich, affluent. He wants to have more than enough to feed his soul and to feed his body. And so he conceives that image. That's the first thing. He's conceived it now. The moment he knows, I want to be rich, he has conceived the image. He's begun to behold with an unveiled face. But he has to go beyond that. He has to be transformed into that same image. It's not enough, it's not sufficient to behold it. He has to be transformed into it. He has to be known as it. Not to know of it, but to be known as it. See, if I am a member of a country and I know another country, then I know of it. But the minute I become a resident or maybe a national of that other country, now I am known as it. So now I'm a Nigerian and I know, say, I know the United States. So I know of it. I could even go there, but I still only know of it. But the moment you can call me, I'm an American, now I know as it. I am known, rather, as it. So James told us in the book of James 1, from verse 21 down to 25. And he says, hold steadfast to the word of life with meekness, because it is the word that can deliver you. Then it says, and don't be like a mere hearer that comes and then he forgets the minute he turns away. He comes, he perceives it, but he forgets the minute he turns away. So this man that we're talking about, Paul, unknown, having nothing, but he wants to be highly elevated. He wants to be great. And now he conceives the image. Okay, good that he's conceived the image. What is he to do next? Is to actually persist in that image as himself until he's transformed from glory to glory unto perfection. But James said, a hearer, he looks at that mirror, he sees himself. Wow, this is what it feels like that I am rich. Wow, so nice. I could have all the comforts of life. I have options. And then after that, he goes back to his way of thinking, his old way of thinking. Begins to see all his environment. He turns away from the mirror. That's what it says. And he forgets what it was like just a moment ago when he was looking in that mirror. Because the mirror we're talking about here is our own consciousness. Pick any idea in this world, any idea. The moment you are conscious of it, you can mirror it. You can see what it is like in your consciousness, even though your physical environment is not representing it. But the man who is a forgetful hearer, he conceives it, then he turns away, and the moment he goes out of his maybe his thoughts or out of his inner conversations, he's back to the old way of thinking, to the old assumptions, to the old thinking, and he forgets. But you and I are not going to do that because now you know that the way that you are being made into God's perfect image, which is Himself, is the way that you and I are going to make anything we want in this world into our perfect image. We're going to make our own selves into our perfect image of whatever we want in this world. And this is what we would be learning in this series. We'll be learning how to do this one after the other, 1 week after the other. But for today, now you know on the level of the promise, you are going to become God's perfect image, which is Himself. It became as we are, that we may become as He is. It became as we are, that we may become as He is. But on the level of the promise, that's it. On the level of the law, you now conceive something, anything that you want in this world. It doesn't matter if there is no evidence for it. There was no evidence for God that man is when he conceived it. But he conceived it and he says, let us make it. It wasn't existent before. He said, let us make it happen. I can conceive it, and that's the only evidence I require that it is. Because if I can conceive it, then I can conceive myself as it. And I can go from let us make man to I am the man. So you do the same thing today. for your life, for anything that you want, and you will transform yourself into the perfect image. That's our lesson today. We'll resume next week with further lessons on this series. However, um, before we go, I'd also like to mention this to all of us. The perfect, just as we have the perfect God's perfect image for the Sunday series, we actually do have for this month exercise, the perfect life is within. All right. And in this particular month, the exercise is simple. The exercise is to look in yourself. What would your whole life be if you go to the very end of your life and create perfection out of it? What would every day of your life be? Now imagine feelingly that every day of your life is actually as that. That's the exercise for June. And those who were in May, they knew that the exercise we did in May completely shifted their self concept. I saw many people transform literally before my own eyes. I myself was one, right? Now we come to June. And William Blake says, all that you behold, though it appears without, it is within in your own wonderful human imagination. You want to put that imagination to test. Know it in a creative manner. Have the creative memory of your power as God. And join in this June. All right. And in this June, there would actually be 9 classes instead of the standard 6. There would be 9 because we would be using my favorite lecture of all time to study this lesson. It is within. And um, I think I'll just publish the calendar, the schedule for everyone to see on the group afterwards. And also, finally, on this, we'll be starting on June 9th. Okay, we'll be starting on June 9th. So, and there are replays in case you're not able to make it live to the Zoom sessions. So, watch out for take your registrations for it. I think I could just post the link right here for all of us. So that's it. So register. And also finally, on the announcement side, is this. Starting July 15 would be interpretations of scriptures by the law of assumption, which is on a daily basis, we take one um, chapter, one passage of scriptures per day, or one story, whichever is necessary. But we are actually, this project is to cover the entire Bible in the next couple of years in interpreting the stories according to the law of assumption and according to the promise. So, for those of us who are really, who have loved and are devoted to the spiritual and scriptural view, rather, the scriptural approach of Neville to the study, of myself to the study, this is the opportunity for you to have a daily study of the Bible along the lines of the law of assumption and really understand. For example, when you read the Psalms and you hear that my enemies are against me, oh Lord, deliver me, it doesn't actually mean that some people in this physical world are against someone. And so instead of making a terrible self concept of people being against you, no, just understand that it's either the Lord or the senses. There's one that you could be paying attention to, that's authority of your life. And when you cry out that your enemies are set against you, they've mocked the Lord, and that the Lord should rise and scatter the enemies, it is only really saying that my 5 senses are infiltrating me with the idea that the wish is not fulfilled. And now, the Lord, it is time for you to really fulfill it as I wait patiently. So, this is the interpretation of scriptures by the law of assumption. And we'll understand further and further that way. So, we'll meet next week, everyone. Until then, have a great, great time. And thank you all for attending this Sunday lecture. Bye bye.